You're listening to Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast for and by Rockies fans on Rocky Mountain Rooftop. Thank you for joining us as we discuss all things baseball and Colorado Rockies. Hello and welcome to Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast on Rocky Mountain Rooftop, the Colorado Rockies affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Evan Lang, and no Skyler this week. He is out, so joining me in his place is friend of the show, Patrick Lyons. Patrick, welcome. Thanks for being on board.
Well, thanks for inviting me. There were a lot of transactions for the Rockies, and it doesn't change here at Rocky Mountain Rooftop. So glad to just get the call up from Triple ABQ.
Skyler has been optioned.
It's better than DF8.
And we have selected the contract of Patrick Lyons. We might as well dive right into that because it has been a wild week of transactions, or even weekend of transactions, because we had a bunch of, in time of recording, it's Memorial Day, so Monday the 27th. We had a bunch of roster transactions on Friday. And then this morning, prior to the game against Cleveland, we had a bunch more transactions. So we might as well just dive right into that, where, excuse me, we had on Friday, after the bullpen meltdown that was the Oakland Athletics series, the Rockies held a lead in all three of those games. All three were extremely winnable, three pretty good performances from the starting pitching, and then just had a complete collapse from the bullpen, including a walk-off, the most painful of which was a game where in the 11th inning, we led 9-5 and still lost. I really didn't even know what to say at the time. But what ended up happening after that was just a whole flurry of roster moves where the Rockies designated Matt Cook for assignment. Matt Cook had just been called up. He had one, very quick outing where he got the final out of the game in a save. And then as part of that 9-5 ending up losing 10-9 game, he came in and just got swatted around, unfortunately. And I feel for him, but it's part of the business of baseball is that he wasn't able to perform, and so he was designated for assignment. I would not be surprised at all if he clears waivers, but he made room on the roster, as well as Kyle Freeland being moved to the 60-day injured list. And before people panic about that, we've already talked about it. The Rockies say this is purely an administrative move, that Kyle's already been on the injured list for over 30 days. They're not expecting him to be ready to go by the 60-day mark. So you might as well move him to the 60 so that you can clear a spot on the 40-man while he rehabs. They say everything's going well with his progression. He's rehabbing well, and they're eventually going to get to the point where they can look at putting him in for a rehab assignment in Albuquerque or Hartford or really anywhere they want to at that point in time. But so Matt Cook DFA and Kyle Freeland moved to the 60-day, and they selected the contracts of Matt Caracidi and John Curtis from AAA. They also optioned Peter Lambert down to AAA. So two new guys up, though Caracidi was part of the bullpen last year and pitched fairly well, so I'm happy for him to get that opportunity. And then we won the first game against the Phillies, and then in the second game, we had a bullpen meltdown again. And that led to John Curtis, who the time-honored tradition of a Rockies reliever making their debut at Coors Field and just immediately giving up a tremendous home run. Pitched 3 pitches to Bryce Harper, and the third of that was a 3-run home run to cement a 6-run 9th inning in a game that the Rockies held the lead in at that point. So that was painful. But then that leads us into this morning, Monday morning, where John Curtis is designated for assignment, and then a bunch more moves happen because Austin Gomber was scratched from his start. They're calling it left arm soreness, nothing they're super concerned about, just wanted to scratch it, give him time to recover, and then he'll make his next start against the Dodgers. But then Peter Lambert's called back up. John Curtis is designated for assignment, and it's just been a lot of really, really weird moves because, we just had Peter Lambert optioned, and within 3 days he's called back up because they need a potential long reliever for Anthony Molina to make his first career start. They also put Justin Lawrence on the 15-day injured list due to right arm and shoulder soreness. And I think that's more of the bigger story, Patrick, because we love Justin Lawrence. He's got amazing stuff. He's got such potential. He had an incredible season last year, but this year it's been rough for J-Law.
Yeah, it has been. It's frustrating at times, especially when, you know, your stock is on the rise, which for Justin Lawrence, it seems like it's been that way for the last 2 years, and hasn't come to fruition this season as much as he or the Rockies would have liked. I know that, and while I was not in the clubhouse the last couple days, I know that there are times in which some guys just need a trip to the IL rather than a trip to AAA. So you just need a little bit of rest. You need to kind of clear your head to help reset some things. And so you sort of hope that it's that rather than an actual injury in some way. So Lawrence will be back out late in games, and so will a slew of other guys that, as you said, with all of those names and those transactions, 4 guys like in the last week that were not even on the 40-man. We're on the 40-man for a little while between Cook, John Curtis, Matt Caracetti, and then Josh Rogers, who in going 5+ innings in relief, it was the longest relief outing on Monday. Maybe I shouldn't get to it yet. But look, anytime you see Chichi Gonzalez's name attached to a player's outing for longest relief performance, you got to mention that. So tip of the cap to Josh Rogers doing it in his first big league game since 2022. The left-hander provided some good innings on Monday. But yeah, bullpen, look, you need to rejuvenate. I think a lot of teams do that, and they have a ton of options. The Rockies don't right now. You know, Gavin Hollowell and Riley Pine are really the only other 2 guys that have stayed on the 40-man roster. Cook was not claimed by anyone, so he was outrighted to AAA, and I think we'll probably end up seeing him again at some point this season, similar to, you know, how the Rockies had a range with Ty Block over the last 3 years. So yeah, you can never have enough arms, and even when you do, you still need about 2 more.
And it's tough because Riley Pint and Gavin Hollowell are both on the injured list right now. It's been there's not a lot of reinforcements down in AAA Albuquerque, and we saw that when they called up Angel Chavi, because they were, you know, I think they were playing in Pittsburgh, and, you know, that's closer to Hartford than it is to Albuquerque. So they just, here's a guy we can have on standby for an emergency. You know, it's a shame for J-Law, and I think it's worth noting that last year in his breakout season, Justin Lawrence was relied on very heavily. 69 appearances and 75 total innings. Very much more than any other point in his career up until that point. And I think we're seeing arm fatigue. And also, I do think we're seeing a little bit of him trying to live up to the additional expectations that were set for him last year. And I really hope, you know, if it is an actual injury, I wish him a quick recovery. If it's more of just, hey, this guy needs a break and we're going to put him on the IL, I hope that break works out for him, because that sweeper is going to sweep. And when it's working amazing. But it just hasn't really been working for him over really all of this season so far. He's had a couple good outings, but, you know, he's got a 5.91 ERA through 21 and a third innings. It's been tough, and it's been tough for the Rockies bullpen in general. And that's why it was nice to see Josh Rogers come up and just pitch really, really solidly for 5 innings in relief of Anthony Molina, because, like I said, there's not a whole ton of reinforcements, and we've honestly kind of exhausted those reinforcements now with all these moves that we've made recently. So it's going to be interesting to see where the Rockies go from here. You know, bullpen, of course, worked out pretty well today. And 2 of those 3 games against the Phillies also worked out pretty well. It was really that one game where things just kind of melted down, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, you know, so much I think was at least made in the Purple Row Slack about 4 players. To me, it's 4 players that, you know, were used a lot last season, and you certainly can say that about relievers, because look, if you're starting every 5 days, you don't necessarily say that you were overused or mistreated in any way like that. But we know how hard up the Rockies were for starting pitching. So how many times did Kyle Freeland and Austin Gomber go out there when they were certainly less than 100%, which is true probably for every player that goes out there on the field, but less than you would like. The Rockies, the starting pitching has been fantastic, right? This is the first time we haven't seen a quality start in about a week. So they have the luxury of saying, you know what, let's save Gomber for the Dodgers. And you like to see that. That's going to be an exciting one this weekend coming up. But when they didn't have that luxury last season, Gomber, Freeland, and the rest of the staff really had to go out there, and Freeland and Gomber were the two that were there all season long. So you kind of worried about them. Gomber has had issues from season to season, right? And Freeland now with the right shoulder. So you hope he's all right with that. But the relievers, Justin Lawrence and Jake Bird, like just leading the league in innings pitched and appearances. And so for Justin Lawrence to, have been out there as much as he was last year, you were hoping, he could get through this season. And both Lawrence and Bird are on the IL right now. And hopefully they stay the minimum, 15 days and they're back and they're okay. But obviously you have some concerns. You have a lot of concerns about different things about the Rockies roster right now, but the brightest spots, that's the worst part is when some of the young players that you're counting on to be an important part of the organization the next time you're going to be contender, when they get put on the IL or when they break an important area of their body and are going to be gone for a little while, which perhaps we'll be talking about that next. That's just never a good sign.
Yeah, and I think for both Bird and Lawrence, two of the most used relievers in all of baseball last year, and both came out the gate this year just not really looking quite right, where we were noting in our Slack channel and to each other, this doesn't look like the Justin Lawrence, this doesn't look like the Jake Bird that we watched last year. And now both of them are on the injured list, and we'll just see how they bounce back from that. And it really is, it's funny to say how lucky the Rockies are about their starting pitching this year, because especially in the last week and change, everybody's been putting in the work. Dakota Hudson had a really gutsy start against the Phillies. Cal Quantrill continues to be just incredible. I am so happy for what he's doing with this team. Austin Gomber has been great. And like you said, we have the luxury of being able to rest Austin Gomber because of how good the rest of this rotation has been. And, having the bullpen be slightly more rested than it has been, because, even Austin Gomber said that it was a good opportunity for him to rest, where he was talking about, we flew back, and this is quoting him from when he spoke to the media this morning. We flew back here, and there was just a little almost like swelling or inflammation in the back of my tricep, kind of where it meets the elbow. So I didn't throw a bullpen. I felt a lot better yesterday, and then I feel a lot better today. I pitched through worse things last year, and we just kind of felt at this point, it's May, and with the schedule, we kind of have the ability to just skip a start and buy me a couple extra days to feel a little bit better, and then the plan is to pitch in LA. So again, even Austin Gomber is noting, hey, we have an opportunity then for me to rest. And, even Anthony Molina, who struggled in his 2 innings, 1 2/3 innings of work today, at least was able to make it through that amount and be a spot starter where he could come in. And yeah, he struggled and it stinks, but he's a rookie, 22 years old, making his first career start. I bet there were very justifiably some jitters there.
Absolutely. We know the plan was for him to be the long reliever, and you figured maybe at some point late in the season or at some point during the year, like, yeah, we might need you for a spot start. But, how much did Anthony Molina actually know that? I'm sure someone probably at one point in spring training say, yeah, that something like that might happen. But that's kind of out of sight, out of mind. You're needed as a long reliever, and if that opportunity comes, so be it. And then all of a sudden it does come, and you go, whoa, oh, here we go. All right.
This morning, go get him, kid.
Yeah, for sure. So that was good for him to kind of get his feet wet in that way. And knowing that, look, we're not expecting you to go 5-6 innings, right? We just called up Josh Rogers, who is a starter in the Isotopes rotation. Just give us what you can. So instead of doing it in maybe the 5th, 6th and a cleanup role in those innings, you're just doing it in the first 2. So it's good for Molina to get a little bit of experience in that today.
It really is. And, he's so young, and he's been a Rule 5 pick. And So he's safe pretty much from a lot of the roster churn that the Rockies are going to have throughout this season, unless they want to give him back to Tampa, because the Rockies have been pretty clear that they view him as a potential future piece of the rotation. They've compared him to Herman Marquez. I've compared him to Antonio Senzatela. He's got potential. And before, today and before his last outing against the Giants on the 17th, he had gone like five straight outings, most of the multi-inning outings, without giving up a run. So he's showing progress. He's showing development. And I honestly think he's farther ahead of schedule than one would expect right now. But it was nice to be able to turn to him this morning. And, although things didn't go to plan, he went out there and he did his best. And I look forward to him getting more opportunities in the future. But I honestly think if there's going to be another spot start, it's probably just going to fall directly to Josh Rogers, just because of how well he pitched today. And he's already a starter. He's started all 9 games down in Albuquerque. So that's really the pitching side of things. But then the whole other thing to get to is that Rockies top prospect, MLB top 100 prospect, starting outfielder, starting left fielder, Mr. Mike Honcho, Jordan Beck, is out for the foreseeable future. He made a spectacular diving catch against the Phillies, and unfortunately he came up and appeared hurt, was walking off the field. He was taken out of the game. I was concerned when the news came shortly after that the Isotopes had pulled Sean Bouchard from the lineup from the game they were playing down in Albuquerque, because that's usually a sign that the team thinks the injury is pretty serious. And it turns out it was. Jordan Beck has broken his left hand. He's expected to have surgery this week. It sounds like they're going to install a plate in his hand that will hopefully speed up his recovery time. But we are looking at 4 to 6 weeks minimum. Patrick, what are your thoughts on the impact of losing Jordan Beck for the next couple months?
Yeah, that's a rough one in a season where there wasn't a ton to be excited about. I personally, at the big league level, I think this year started off similar to last year, and then out of nowhere, here comes Nolan Jones. Here comes Bretton Doyle. There's Ezekiel Tovar, probably not getting the credit he deserved, right? Not winning a Gold Glove, was a finalist, but didn't finish 4th in the NL Rookie of the Year award voting, like a Nolan Jones, just being steady Zeke, right? And then this year it was like, okay, well, who are going to be the next guys to do that? And can Tovar continue that and forego a sophomore slump? And he has, and that's been really positive. Bretton Doyle actually taking a step forward has been fantastic. Jones on the IL with some back issues. He should be doing some baseball activities soon here. Maybe another rehab stint with the Isotopes before coming back to the Rockies and reclaiming left field. But you would sort of hope that the next generation of players, there'd be another wave of guys that would come up and make an impact, so you could really start to see that, you know what, maybe there is a plan in place, and maybe this plan will come to fruition starting by the second half of 2025 and 2026. And Jordan Beck is a key part of that, especially when you look, and pretty much all of the best Rockies prospects that are going to be counted upon to contribute are all at AA, 2 levels away. I think you can maybe sort of squint and see some of those arms for the yard goats and say, you know what, Carson Palmquist, he actually might skip right over AAA, and maybe he'll stick in the majors, maybe not. But if he doesn't, he can go to AAA, get a little more seasoning, but he'll be back up in no time. And Jordan Beck just, I think, was supposed to be this integral part, and that doesn't take away from any of the highlights that we've already seen this year. Really strong defender out in left field, can play center in a pinch, provide some pop. So he's had some great highlights, and they might be done for this year. But if you're a Rockies fan, you have to be obviously pretty disappointed to know that the final 2/3 of the season, no more Jordan Beck highlights at this point.
Yeah, for Beck, it's really tough because sometimes it's tough to give the Rockies credit for doing the right thing when they also make a lot of mistakes. But since Nolan Jones got hurt and they called up Jordan Beck, they had very clearly committed to him being an everyday player, like they did last year with Ezekiel Tovar, like they did last year with Bretton Doyle, and even with Nolan Jones in May starting last year. And they were doing that for Beck. He started called up April 30th, and he started all but one game in between then and when he was hurt at the beginning of the Phillies series. And his defense was really good. His bat was a little all over the place, as you would expect for a guy who's really rushed through the minor leagues and was getting his first real taste of major league pitching. But there was some clear development happening there where he was making good contact. His at-bats were getting more patient. And I do think that we are going to see Jordan Beck come back this season. My guess is probably in August, but it's gonna be difficult to see how they're going to slot him in, because by that point, we will hopefully have Nolan Jones back. Nolan Jones today, for the first time, was swinging during batting practice and doing some running, which means that he will hopefully be assigned to a rehab assignment again in the near future. They are hoping maybe at the end of this Cleveland series. But then you've got and I wrote about it on Purple Row for today on Monday, just such a glut of outfielders. So you've got Beck, Cave, Blackman, Bryant sometimes, Goodman, Doyle, Sean Bouchard. You've got so many people, and the hope is that by the time Jordan Beck is back, the Rockies have made some moves, expected to be sellers at the deadline, and there was going to be a spot for him. It's tough because, and this is honestly a great situation to be in, is that we have so many outfield prospects, and Brenton Doyle has, if he continues to hit as he has with this improved development, he's set. He's locked down his position as the Rockies center fielder, which really only leaves 2 spots between 4+ corner outfield prospects. So it's going to be tough to figure out what the Rockies are going to do. But I do think we get Jordan Beck back this year. I think we get to see him play more in the big leagues, and it's going to be interesting to see. Maybe we have him in left field and Nolan Jones in right, or the other way around, or maybe they make additional moves and someone else goes and it's going to be, say, Zach Veen in right field and Jordan Beck in left. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I think Beck will probably, obviously have a little rehab assignment. If the goal is for him to get everyday at bats, which, like you said, credit the Rockies for being aggressive, starting him at AAA to begin with. They were right. That was what he needed, a little bit of extra challenge, right? And he rose to the challenge, absolutely, and did really well. Still waiting on that first home run at Coors Field, which I'm sure he's probably kicking himself for right now, going, wish I would have just gotten that first one under my belt. But nevertheless, I think he will get some of those opportunities if he's back in August. I don't think it'll come right away. I think he'll probably, start in AAA for a little while just to get more of those ABs. And, Rockies at that point will have probably cleared up some space. Only thing is, if you look at most of their players that are on expiring deals or even a year away at the end of 2025, none of them are outfielders. So, are they going to have to get creative, which we know they can have some difficulty with doing that. But at the end of the day, going back to what you started off by saying, Evan, was they turned the keys over to Jordan Beck, saying, hey, this guy is an important part of the future. And we're not going to let, some good at-bats by Sean Bouchard, Hunter Goodman, Elias Montero, any of that get in the way of a guy that we really want to develop more as a big leaguer now. So, yeah, they're going to find room for him in September again.
The biggest thing for finding room for me is what they do with Jake Cave. If Jake Cave is still around after the trade deadline, that's a problem. I know they like him because he's a good veteran presence. He's a lefty bat in the lineup, and he plays all the outfield positions. But at some point, he's got to go to clear up space, whether it's for Nolan Jones coming back or Jordan Beck coming back. So it's for me, that's what is, I think, going to be key, is for the outfield spots. It's going to be him, and it's going to be making a decision on Sean Bouchard, because Sean Bouchard is 28 years old, and I love Bouchard. His ability to get on base is incredible, honestly. But can you really say that a 28-year-old is going to be the future in the corner outfield when you've got a bunch of guys who are 23 and 24? My personal opinion is that you then make the dedication that Bouchard is going to be your fourth outfielder, bench bat, occasional DH, because he's shown that he can come off the bench and get on base. And that's something that you really, really need. And, I do think, unfortunately, as much as I love him, Alan Trejo's days are going to be numbered with this team in favor of probably Bouchard or somebody like that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do. And Bouchard, of many of the players that have been, named, in addition to Elias Montero, really can only play one position, right? I mean, you could say corner outfield, right? You can go left or right, but ultimately, is stuck in one spot. Same thing with Montero over at first base, whereas Goodman in right, first base, now even doing catching, kind of. I mean, he actually did finally start a game there in San Francisco, which was great to see. So there's a roster crunch, I think, in certain areas, and part of the problem, if you will, is Rockies don't really work with too many other teams, right? It's hard to extract value from something that has smaller amounts of value than others, right? There are fourth outfielders that are typically available all the time, designated for assignment, or relievers that have some upside but just aren't putting it together, right? Same thing with Jake Cave, providing a lot of value for Bud Black and the Rockies and their recent positive play throughout the month of May. But how much are you going to get from him, from other teams? Probably not that much. Same thing with Sean Bouchard, who I kind of compared to a Connor Joe, right? Connor Joe, obviously, a lot more beloved than Sean Bouchard, but I think those who are watching the games know how good Sean Bouchard is and his value and his at-bats. I mean, Buddy loves, I think, having him in that lineup for what he's able to do to extend and get the opposing pitcher, whether it's a starter or reliever, to just fire off more pitches and see more. And that has a lot of value. But players like that with that kind of value are available all the time. And it's going to be hard for the Rockies to maybe trade somebody like him and get a lot back, if anything. So I think he'll probably be safe to be around after the trade deadline.
We'll keep this conversation going in just a minute. We just got to take a really quick ad break, so don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back. Thank you for sticking with us through that ad break. I'm Evan. With me is Patrick Lyons, friend of the show. We were just talking about potential trade value for guys like, Jake Cave and Sean Bouchard. And he brought up, how tough it is because sometimes players like that are widely available. But something I thought was interesting is you mentioned Connor Joe, and the Rockies did get some trade value for Connor Joe. And it was the same for last year. We managed to get some value out of guys like Mike Moustakas. And so I think that not all hope is lost with that, especially because the Rockies do have some regular trade partners, it appears. The Atlanta Braves, the Los Angeles Angels, and the Cleveland Guardians are like the three teams that we are regularly trading with at this point. So maybe we call up Atlanta, who just had their star outfielder go down for the year, and say, can we interest you in a very versatile defender in Jake Cave?
I mean, yeah, I'm sure those conversations are happening, but Black would not be very happy to lose somebody like Jake Cave, of course. But yeah, certainly that can happen. What is Atlanta going to offer back, and is it going to be viewed as, I'm not going to say insulting, but if they're just offering a guy who's, let's say, in low A batting 200, the Rockies are going to say, well, the optics on this looks really bad. It's bad enough if we trade anybody this early, right? I think they have been worried about that last year, as you point out, with the Mike Moustakas deal. That was pretty aggressive. I think that was really the first trade of the summer. We can't go back in time, and no one's going to beat Luis Arias. That might have been an extreme situation unto itself. But they were aggressive there early in June, trading him to the Angels, and they got back a larger return than they would have if they would have waited. So, Moustakas checked off that box as being a left-handed power bat, a veteran presence. Was a great fit for the Angels, even though that didn't quite work out. Cave, Atlanta, that probably would be a decent of a fit. But again, how much are you going to get for him? You saw the return on Connor Joe was Dylan Spain, and I sort of wanted to pull his numbers up. I was really excited from the scouting reports on Dylan Spain going into last year, pitching with the Hartford Yard Goats, and thought maybe the Rockies had something on their hands, and they still might. But nevertheless, he's kind of struggled to find success with Hartford last year as well as this year. But you can always be hopeful if you get something that has value to you, and you think you might be able to tool up a little bit. And a 6'6" right-handed reliever like Dylan Spain, I thought that was a nice pickup when you didn't really want to keep Connor Joe around. You needed to free up some space for some other guys, and that's the same situation here. You probably need to free up a little bit of space for some other guys. So maybe the Rockies will surprise again.
Yeah, and it was the same with Moustakas, where we got a guy who potentially has very high upside, but we just need to see them put it together in Connor Van Scoyoc, who has unfortunately struggled a lot in Hartford this year, but the upside is still there if he can put it together. And I think that's the same kind of thing you're going to get. I don't think the Rockies are going to get as lucky as they did with Atlanta giving them Victor Vodnik, who has been just so good so far this season. But I think for some of these guys, if you can extract any value whatsoever, then that can be a win. It's like we said with Mike Moustakas. You come in, you play some at bats, you perform adequately, and then we can ship you out and get a little bit in return. That's a win in my book. But it's tough because it is true that a lot of these guys you might not necessarily get a ton of value for. The guy who's the most valuable with the Rockies right now is going to be Elias Diaz. And Bob Nightingale and other sources have reported that teams are calling about Elias Diaz. And that's not surprising at all, considering how good of a season he's been off to start. He's on the final year of his contract with the Rockies. And unfortunately, as much as I love Elias, there's not really room for him in the future of this organization, because down in AAA, Drew Romo is just about ready to go. You can hear him clawing at the door. And so I think if the Rockies do pull the trigger and trade anyone early for maximum value, it's probably going to be Diaz.
Yeah, no, I like that take, especially because of how great Jacob Stallings is playing too. So I don't think you're losing much there to begin with. And I have to correct myself. I was doing this last year too. The Rockies made 2 trades last offseason, 2 off seasons ago. Connor Joe and Sam Hilliard. Dylan Spain was in the Sam Hilliard deal. Nick Garcia
from Pittsburgh
was the guy.
Also hasn't really worked out though.
He's pitching great in AA right now, except it's for the Richmond Flying Squirrels. He's with the Giants. He was a minor league free agent, so picked up with them. But yeah, Diaz absolutely has a lot of really good trade value. He as solid as he's been this year, and as solid as he was last year, catchers don't really get the same amount of trade value as other top players at their position, right? And there are those career catchers that just jump around, and they're career backup catchers almost everywhere you go. The cost of that is so much less than a player with more of an impact like Elias Diaz. So again, how much more are the Rockies going to be able to extract from a trade partner? If they're playing, they might be playing hardball too hard, because again, as you pointed out, there's like 3 teams that they'll make a deal with and none other. So it will be really interesting to see, what ends up happening with that, because Stallings is there doing a great job. He's that veteran presence. I believe there's a mutual option for next year, so you can have him back, and you're not completely turning the keys over to someone like Drew Romo. So that seems like it's the one that's definitely going to happen. Should it have happened last summer? Maybe. Did him winning the MVP in the All-Star game have anything to do with that? Perhaps, but they're still able to get a lot of value from someone like Elias Diaz right now as one of the top trade targets at this year's trade deadline.
And I still think there is a lot of opportunity to get top value, though. Admittedly, if I'm being honest, I think the absolute top value that we could have gotten for Diaz has actually already passed us by this season, where we could have got a Mets team or a San Francisco Giants team, both of which would have multiple catchers go down due to injury, to maybe pay a little bit of a premium on a ready-to-go, very injury-resistant starting catcher. And unfortunately, I feel like that opportunity has passed us by for both of those teams. But like you said, and like we said, there's still plenty of value to be had from Elias. He's going to be gone at some point, and I think the Rockies know that. I think even the Rockies, for as foolish as they can be, understand that it's going to be time to move on from Elias. You're not going to sign a 33, almost 34-year-old catcher to a major extension when you've got your top prospect ready to go, basically. So that'll be interesting to see. But I definitely agree with you. The Rockies have set themselves up very well for that scenario with Jacob Stallings, because he is a good defensive catcher. He's good at building rapport with the pitchers. He's good at helping the rookies out. I think he'll be a great mentor for Drew Romo. And unlike a lot of other seasons with Stallings, he's hitting extremely well, to the point where if you really wanted to get funky with it, you could trade Jacob Stallings as well. Because then you need a backup catcher. Well, hey, Hunter Goodman can do that.
Yeah, you could. I mean, you could have a pretty impressive rookie catchers. You could have a pair of them. Yeah, that would be pretty wild. Here's my question to you. You talked about teams that were in need of catchers because they had two guys that were on the IL at the same time. I thought you were going to say St. Louis Cardinals because of Wilson Contreras. Now,
you're right.
Do you think the Rockies are going to have some pause in making any trades with the St. Louis Cardinals again? In that this all goes back to the mind of Monfort, right? And worrying about optics and what he values and what he doesn't value, and is he valuing the right things? I think if the St. Louis Cardinals have the best offer, you trade Elias Diaz. You get through the memes, you get through the jokes about $50 million sending that way for future Hall of Famer Nolan Arenado. You get past that. It is what it is. The real fans are going to be ready to move on and say, but no, seriously, who are these prospects? Because they are going to be here. They could very well be here past the point in which Nolan Arenado calls it a career at this point at his age. So you really just have to take the best offer and just not worry about the impact of any of that. If you really want your goal to be getting back to contention, getting back to relevancy, as far as Major League Baseball is concerned. And so the best offer is the one that you take, you make that deal and you move forward with your franchise.
And I think it is definitely, I 100% think that Dick Monfort is going to be extremely hesitant to trade with the Cardinals, just because we know that he does not like being criticized. He really did not handle the amount of blowback from the Nolan Arenado trade well. That trade is what basically drove the front office into hiding when it comes to doing things like postseason debriefings and public interviews and things like that. But you look at the Cardinals' top prospects ranking, and they have a ton of pitchers in their top 30 prospects per MLB pipeline, including a bunch of young guys who are already in double or triple A. Their number 4 overall prospect, Tekoa Roby, is 22 years old and he's already in double A. They've got a 24-year-old guy named Gordon Graceffo who's in triple A. They've got guys who, if they are willing to part with any of them for Diaz, who would fill in for, man, that broken arm for Contreras was tough. You've got to pull the trigger on that, even if you're hesitant, even if you think that they're going to be like, oh man, another trade with the Cardinals where the Rockies such and such. You got to deal with it. Like, you have to make the moves that are the best for the team. And I'd agree that, like, if the Cardinals are willing to give a good return, or what can be perceived as a good return for Diaz, you've got to jump on it. It's got to be whoever's making the best offer you take. You don't decline a good offer for a slightly worse offer because you think the optics of it are better. And I think that's something that hopefully this front office is going to start to understand here in the near future, because they've made some good moves, optics be darned, like trading Connor Joe. People loved Connor Joe, but he didn't really fit into the future of the organization, and they got at least something for him in return.
Yeah, I got a lot to say about that. Going into that offseason, I figured the Rockies would probably do close to half of, in the past, what they probably wouldn't have done. And that was, get rid of some franchise favorites. They got rid of Connor Joe. Sam Hilliard, also very much a favorite. And they did not re-sign to a minor league deal, Wynton Bernard. They let 3 really great fan favorites go after that 2022 season, but that was the right move, right? And so part of the thing that they're struggling with right now, and I think with so many players getting injured, that almost has made their choice for them. But they have to make a choice when it comes to all of these outfielders, because there's frankly too many of them, right? And I think there are other teams out there that probably view what the Rockies have, and they might say, yeah, the Rockies do like this guy maybe a little bit more than we would, so we're not interested in them. But the Rockies can pick this is who we think are going to be the players. And then the other ones they can go ahead and dangle. So imagine if Veen and Benny Montgomery were both healthy right now, and you have this glut of outfielders. Jordan Beck, still healthy, right? You say, we'll give you Elias Diaz. But what if we also threw in, and whoever the fourth or fifth guy is on their tier of young outfielders, maybe Sterling Thompson is even in that group, right? Because we know he is versatile, plays a little bit of outfield, and you don't believe in him as an infielder. What if we threw him in? How are we going to sweeten that deal? What else can you give me? Can you improve on your, eighth best prospect and now give us your number 3? Like, getting creative that way, making a choice and say, hey, we love all our guys, but we love these guys the most. These are the ones we're going to protect. We'll play hardball, but you know what? Yeah, we'll let these other ones go. And if they have success with that team, so be it. That's going to happen. You can't necessarily, when you win a trade, it really should feel like we won the trade. They can feel like they won it too, but we just know we didn't lose the trade. We gave up something that we didn't need, like Juan Brito wasn't going to make their 40-man roster. So in that sense, the Rockies won the trade with the Guardians because they brought back Nolan Jones. Now, if the Guardians felt like they had enough outfield depth, which they don't, they didn't at the time at least, they probably would like to have that back. But look, they can say, well, you know what? We kind of had a hole in our middle infield, and we like Juan Brito. We like what he's able to do. They can also feel really good about that too. Winning a trade isn't necessarily, we got way more. You stunk. We ripped you off in that capacity. I think the Rockies just have to be okay with, look, as long as we're happy with what we get on our end, it's okay. Let's go ahead and make that deal.
Yeah, you don't have to always win a trade. Sometimes the best trades are the ones that work out for both sides. A great example from outside of baseball is when the Colorado Avalanche traded 1-for-1 Bo Byram for Casey Middlestat with the Buffalo Sabres. Bo Byram, a great defender who, because of how deep the Avs are on their first defensive line, was never going to get to really be that 1D that he could be. The Sabres needed that. The Avs really needed a second line center, and that's how it worked out. Both teams, I think, walk away happy from that, and I think that's how it's going to work out with that Juan Brito trade, because Brito's been doing very well for the Guardians in their farm system, and if Nolan Jones can come back and be healthy, then that's fantastic for us as well. I think looking at the Rockies in terms of their depth with these outfielders, like I said earlier today in my article on Purple Row, 5 of the Rockies' top 10 prospects are outfielders or part outfielders. And that's excluding Jordan Beck. And 4 of those guys are in Double-A. You don't have a ton of time left with these guys anymore. And I think the only guy who you're going to go, he is completely untouchable right now, is probably Zach Veen. More than anybody. I think Yanquiel Fernandez is fairly safe as well. But I think guys like, I think you're right. If Benny Montgomery was healthy right now, we could go, hey, can we include Benny Montgomery to sweeten the pot or stuff like that? But, he's unfortunately not. His season is over. Veen is also injured, which is a shame, but he's going to be back sooner rather than later. But when it comes to these situations, you've got to make decisions. And it feels like every single year with the Rockies, it's been, we have too many outfields on the big league roster and we have too many outfield prospects. And you can say that for a lot of positions with this team. We have a ton of third base prospects, but if Ryan McMahon is locked down for the future and you decide he's the guy you want to build around, well, then it's time to start moving on from some of these third base prospects. Same for first base, same for, catcher. If Drew Romo, we don't have a ton of catchers. We have some middle infielders. It feels like the Rockies are just blocked at every position because they just don't make these decisions.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of kicking the can down the road, and these things will kind of sort themselves out. And in a way, they do. Like we said, we're talking about all these outfield prospects in the top 11 on MLB Pipeline, as you said, either full-time outfielder or can partially play outfield. 7 of 11. And again, that's Sterling Thompson that can also play some second base, first base. And Cole Carrig, who is he a shortstop? Is he a catcher? Is he a center fielder? Like, he's dynamic, obviously, but 7-11 in the outfield. And yet it kind of sorts itself out because Jordan Beck got hurt. All right, well, that's one thing. And Benny Montgomery and Zach Veen are now down. But if you're able to identify the best guys and you're also able to hit on that, then you can say, well, guess what? We're gonna be the ones who sort it out. We're gonna put all our eggs in these 3 baskets, if you will, and we feel very confident that they're going to work out for whatever reason. Now these other eggs we can go sell and go get something else. We can go buy a cow and oh, look at all the milk. I mean, that's the story of don't count your chickens before they hatch. It was the milkmaid carrying a basket on her head with the eggs, and she started dreaming about selling these eggs, and oh, she's going to trade it for this and she's going to buy that. Hey, you count your chickens before they hatched. But you do that. There's a lot of successful teams that do that. I think, a lot of people want to point at the Padres and say, oh man, they've traded all these prospects and none of them have panned out. Yeah, they did a really good job of identifying the guys that they didn't think were going to develop when they originally drafted them, right? As prospects, they saw something from the inside because it's their guys and said, you know what? Let's actually utilize that as an asset to bring in some big league talent. And in that capacity, it made them a much better team than if they just kept kicking the can down the road like the Rockies and just hoping for them to get to the majors and have 6 solid seasons with them.
And at the end of the day, there's also the opposite of that, which is not being afraid to let go of a guy who might end up being pretty good with another team. I think that's something the Rockies have been very afraid of, especially in the recent future, of parting with a guy that ends up being really good with whatever his new team is, lending to the unfortunate sort of reputation the Rockies have sometimes of being a minor league team, a farm team for the rest of the league. And we've seen members of the Rockies front office come out and say, well, we're not just a farm team for the rest of the league and stuff like that, but sometimes it's okay. And I will say, when they parted ways with Connor Joe and Sam Hilliard, and they did a good job of saying, well, maybe they'll end up being good with the other team, but we've got to move on. And Connor Joe has ended up being pretty good with the Pirates, but Sam Hilliard made his way back to the Rockies because it didn't really stick with the other team. But it's okay to have sometimes a guy move on and have them be better with their new team, as long as it's not you that was holding them back. But I think that's all for the part. We got to take one more quick ad break. When we get back, we'll wrap things up. Talk about how strange the last week or so has been. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in just one moment. Welcome back to Affected by Altitude with Evan and Patrick Lyons. So the last little bit of the show here, I think we need to talk about the very odd week that the Rockies have had, because it all starts with that 7-game win streak. We sweep the Rangers, we sweep the Padres, and then we roll into San Francisco and they kick our butts. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Then we roll into Oakland and we drop games that we definitely should have won, only to come home, tails between our legs, and we take 2 of 3 from the Phillies, the hottest team in the National League, and then start things off with a pretty solid win against the Cleveland Guardians, who are riding a 9-game win streak coming into today's game, and we win. And it's just so odd because there are so many good teams that we've beaten in here, but it's also the team seems a little different from how it was during that April win streak. With today's win, the Rockies are at 500 for the month of May. The last 500 month they had was last May, which is interesting. But another interesting thing is that, so we talked a lot about over the last couple of weeks, that trailing streak where the Rockies set the MLB record for trailing games to start the season consecutively. But over the last, 17 of their last 18 games, they've been winning at some point. And while, yes, we've dropped a lot of winnable games, it's interesting that the Rockies have actually had the lead at some point in a lot of these games now.
Yeah, that it's been strange. Like you said, right? In April, they were just pressing so hard. And despite the fact that, yeah, I thought they'd be 59 and 103. I thought they'd have an identical record as last year. They'd be a 100-loss team. I never thought they'd be a 125-loss team like they were projected to be. It was just like, you're not going to lose a lot of games where you have 5 runs in the first, nothing happens for the rest of the game, and then a really bad team like the Marlins scores 5 in the bottom of the ninth. Like, that's not going to happen all the time. That being said, there was a game in Oakland, like as you just mentioned, and the Rockies are now the only the third team in the modern era to give up runs, to give up 5 or more runs in the ninth inning or later. They've done it 4 times this year. They're the only team in MLB that has done that. They've done it 4 times, ties a modern era record. So, like, okay, that's going to happen, but there's going to be games in which the offense just outscores the opponent, and it's an open shut case, no harm, no foul. Like, that's going to happen. And I think at the point they would start to play 500 ball at home, and they're pretty much already there. They're at that point. It was really the I mean, you can even throw in that Giants series at home where they finally won on game 3 to avoid a sweep by the Giants. But from that point, they're playing about 500, and I don't know if they'll be able to be above 500 because they're now 7-8, or they've won 7 of 8 at home, right? The 1 against the Giants, 3 against the Rangers, 2 out of 3 against the Phillies, and now this one on Memorial Day. So that's not going to continue at that pace, but they'll be maybe within like 5 games under 500 for this stretch. They started 5 games under, so I think in total they'll be 10 games under 500 at Coors Field, and with 79 games, that breaks down to like they'll win 39 games. They'll win. I don't know if that math is not right. Anyway,
don't ask me to do math. It is not my strong point.
30 and 49. No, that's wrong. Anyway, I had written down, I was talking with Manny Randall about it, and we were going through the numbers to try to figure out, like, all right, well, what could they possibly be at home? 35. I'm going to try this again in my head really quickly. 35 and 45, about that. 35 and 45 at home. And then, how do you get to 62 wins if you're only winning 35 at home, which is still decent. Like, it's still around 500. So it's just been like you said, a weird week, but I think there has to be some balance. And law of averages say you're going to have some good runs in a season, and they were kind of overdue for it, right? It'll be interesting to see if they can be interesting again for another stretch this season, because they had kind of an easy schedule to start the year. So to think that it's only going to get worse is kind of wild.
But it's wild because they've been playing up to the competition a little bit. Like, outside of that, 6-run ninth inning in the second Phillies game where they lost, they kept things pretty close with a very hot offensive team that also happens to have some of the best starting pitching in all of baseball. The Rockies were the first real team to do damage to Ranger Suarez this year. They were also the first real team to do any damage to the flame-throwing closer of the Oakland A's, Mason Miller. Like, the only team that he gave up multiple runs to in over a month. And they still lost 2-3 in Oakland. All 3 games they led at some point or were leading late into the game and then just imploded with the bullpen. You had that one where we blew multiple 4-run leads in the same game. And then you come back to Coors Field and all of a sudden you're putting up a fight with the Phillies. And you keep getting dealt these difficult hands. You have these bullpen implosions. You have the injury to Nolan Jones. You have the injury to Jordan Beck. But it's just, I also never bought into the Rockies being a historically bad team. They're going to set a lot of really weird records this year. Some bad, some good. A lot of them bad. But to look at all the people saying, oh, the Rockies are on pace to lose 130 games, 125 games, when that's not really something that's happened in a century, especially when it's early enough in the season for things to sort of even out. I think we are going to see the Rockies are going to be, and this is what we've said early in the year. We said, like, I didn't expect the Rockies. I expected the Rockies to be bad. I didn't expect it to be this bad. It's going to even out. The Rockies are still not going to be a great team, but they're going to be a weird and interesting team at least, and that's what makes it at least watchable. And it's going to average out where they're not as bad as they had looked at the beginning of the year. April was really bad. April was really bad last year, but eventually things are going to sort of even out. And eventually you're going to see the Rockies do more interesting things like we talked about. When Jordan Beck comes back, what roster moves are they going to make? What young guys are they going to pull up? And the fact that at the very least, we can be weird enough to ruin the day of these playoff hopeful teams, end a 9-game win streak for the Cleveland Guardians, who hit the ground running with their new manager after last season, or, shut the door on the Phillies 2 of 3 games, the Phillies who are, one of the teams that are the favorites to be in the World Series this year, to sweep the defending champion Texas Rangers. We can at least have some fun with it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the Rockies needed to just be reminded of how good they are. Like, even the worst team in any professional sport is probably better than anyone you've ever met in your life. Like, I think, we forget about that. And as bad as the worst big league team is, it's better than the best AAA team. Like, there's a reason that happens. And they just needed to be reminded of how good they were. And they had none of those reminders in April. And now, since the 7-game winning streak and just getting hot, they're like, yeah, okay, no, we can hang. And all right, this team beat us. They are better than us, but let's win one tomorrow and we might be able to take one. And in April, it almost felt like, maybe they didn't believe that they could actually take one here and there. They're going to say all the right things and do all the right things, but you got to think that some doubt crept into their head. And now it's,
I don't think they did believe, because I remember just when we were watching these games in April, and Patrick, I've had these conversations with you, all of us writers, we felt pretty miserable because just nothing fun was happening. And you looked at the dugout and all the players looked miserable. They would say things in the post-game presser of, we're playing our hardest and eventually things are going to right the ship. But their body language and their facial expressions didn't really relay the same message. But now in May, after you've had that win streak and you've had some interesting and fun wins, you're seeing guys like Ryan McMahon, Cal Quantrill, other guys in these leadership roles stepping up. And it really does seem like they think, we're a rebuilding team. They've all acknowledged that at this point. But we can take a few games here or there. We can do our best. We can still have fun playing the game that we love. And I think that's the biggest thing is in the month of May, and I hope this continues for the rest of the year, the guys look like they're having fun again, something that we really didn't see from them in April. And I think that's the big thing is that morale boost of now you've proven you can rattle off some consecutive wins. You can beat some good teams. You can be a heartbreaker. And I like that for this team. It makes them a heck of a lot more watchable, that's for sure.
The player I give a ton of the credit to, and I wrote about this for justbaseball.com, is Cal Quantrill. He has this bulldog attitude. And Austin Gomber has pitched better than Cal Quantrill, but Quantrill has just had this way about him that he's already tired of talking about altitude. He's like, yeah, it's like beating a dead horse. So, like, let's just try to use it to our advantage. The opposing pitcher does not want to be here. I've heard that years from other Rockies pitchers. That's just a known. And, yeah, that's true. That's obvious. But Cal Quantrill has gone out there and done it. Think back to when they really first started getting their first taste of momentum was the second game or the first game of the doubleheader against the Seattle Mariners, where he was getting sick in between innings. And he went out and he threw 108 pitches, which I think only Antonio Senzatella had hit that mark or more in the last 5 years. And so the dude's getting sick in between innings, and he still goes out there. And at that point, they end up splitting the series with the Padres right after that. So they go 3-3, and it's their first series that they didn't lose. And I feel like Quantrill kind of helped spark that a little bit too. If you look at some of their win streaks, he's on both ends of the start and the end of it. So he's been, critical in that, and he's got that veteran mentality. With his dad's a big leaguer, so he knows, like, yeah, cool. We're all really good, but it almost doesn't matter that we're really good. We just have to get it done, and we've got to find a way. And sometimes you have to be better than your best. And I think Cal Quantrill has absolutely shown that and has been a real standout this season.
It's one of the reasons why if you get a truly incredible offer, sure, maybe you entertain it, but I really would like the Rockies to keep Cal around because he is a pitcher. He makes no excuses. He's got that dog in him, as the kids today say, where he goes out and he finds a way to get it on. He had a really great post-game presser after his start in Oakland, where he had trouble commanding his splitter, which has been one of his best pitches this year. It's a pitch that he worked on adding to his arsenal over the offseason. It has paid dividends. And he, in his post-game presser, when he's asked about it, he's like, yeah, I didn't have it to start, so I needed to find it because I'm sure as hell not going to face a big league lineup without trying to get that pitch figured out. No excuse. No, I just couldn't do it. It's no, I needed to find that pitch. So that's what I did. And he really has. Like, the guy's been here for a couple months and he's stepped up big in a leadership way, I think, for the pitching staff and for the team, and just setting a really good example.
He has, I think, a 2.10 ERA in 4 starts at Coors Field. I mean, come on. Like, this is absolutely a guy that you want around. You'd love to maybe sign an extension for him, but he's still young enough where he's waiting on that first really big contract. And I think he's proven now, after some injury issues last year with the Guardians, looked really well in the final month of the season. And it's kind of crazy to think that they would have gotten rid of a guy because he was going to make about $6.5 million in arbitration. But their loss absolutely has been the Rockies' gain this season.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to him about that. That's got to put a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, where he pitched really well for almost all of his career. He has one bad season that's, he had nagging injuries that whole season, and they waive him, and the Rockies swoop in and pick him up, and the Rockies have him under team control for another year after this. And I would really like to see him stick around at least for next year. And he definitely is owed that, that big boy contract after next year. And if the Rockies give it to him, great. But if someone else gives it to him, well deserved as well. He's a guy who I've just absolutely fallen for this season. He's my favorite pitcher to watch in the Rockies lineup. He's great. I love Cal. I liked the move when we picked him up. I thought it had very high upside. And so far that upside is shown off in spades.
The $1 million question, Evan, is, and I don't know if we've got everything covered on the Rockies end that if we want to start getting silly here, but the $1 million question I think that everyone wants to know is, will you be getting a Cal Quantrill jersey anytime soon? And if not, who's next up?
So I've got my running rule, which is if you hit a grand slam or if you hit a big walk-off home run, you are in the running for me to purchase your jersey. I've had that happen a couple times where it's guys I already own their jersey for, because I unfortunately have a lot of jerseys. It was Ryan McMahon when he hit the walk-off grand slam. It's like, well, shoot, I already have one of those. For Cal, it would be if I knew he was going to stick around long-term. It's tough because you don't necessarily want to buy the jersey of a guy who's going to be gone in a year or gone in 2 years. But, if he did something like, say, a complete game shutout, or maybe even a no-hitter, I'm first in line.
I was going to argue a complete game, 1 run or less, but
I'd take it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That would get it done. Also, what about this? Since you already have a Ryan McMahon jersey and you're a man of your word and he hit a walk-off grand slam to win it, you get maybe a Yard Goats McMahon jersy. Or dare I say, and I don't know where you're getting this from. It's clearly some kind of custom, but you can get it done if you want it. How about an Asheville tourist Ryan McMahon jersey?
I bet there's some floating out there. I tend to skull eBay for these kinds of things. Minor league jerseys are tough because they don't really sell customs on their online shops. You usually have to get them customized in stadium if you're there. And, I've never been to Hartford or Asheville or any of these other places. But, I'll keep an eye out if I can find some interesting Ryan McMahon swag online. There is one guy, I have no idea who he is or if he has some connection with the team, but he sells so many game-used Isotopes jerseys.
You might be able to get, Isotopes is probably your best bet. I know that I'm pretty sure the Yard Goats had a Brendan Rodgers jersey for a while, and the Lancaster Jethawks had also a Brendan Rodgers jersey for a period of time.
And I miss having I understand the streamlining process has been overall good for having only you have your ACL and then your 4 affiliates. But I do miss I miss the Asheville Taurus and the Boise Hawks, the Lancaster Jethawks. the Grand Junction Rockies.
So Evan, that maybe needs to be a side hustle for you and me. We'll have to figure it out. I don't know if we need to get a oh shoot, I can't think of the word. If you deal in fabrics, not a tailor, but anyway, we'll see if we can contact a factory somewhere, and we'll have to make very small, limited prints, like maybe even five jerseys are made at a time. And the first one, of course, that we would have to make, of course, would be the Casper Ghost Nolan Arenado or Trevor Story, whichever one you want to go with.
I could do you one better
black
for that.
Casper Ghost's black vest. Come on, there's easily
what
5
about though
a
one that I've actually been looking for, a Todd Helton New Haven Ravens jersey.
Ooh, would love that. That's
because
great.
that's probably of all the minor league affiliates, name wise, the one I've liked the best in our entire franchise history. New Haven Ravens is a great name. It rhymes.
Well, I think when I did a my top 10, I did like a series of podcasts of my top 10 of all time, and I had the New Haven Ravens, I believe, at number 1.
I remember that one.
Yeah, and they had. What's cool is because now the Rockies, their batting practice cap is purple, but it has like these black pinstripes, which you don't really see. The New Haven Ravens had that as their cap, or it was white with black pinstripes. So there's a couple New Haven Raven items that are kicking around on eBay here and there.
I remember when a bunch of teams used to have pinstripe caps. It's just like regular caps. They wore the Cincinnati Reds for a while in the 90s. Yeah. Their main cap was a white cap with red pinstripes on it. I remember that because it was the player photo that they used when they obtained guys like Stan Belinda, who one of my guys who no one ever talks about anymore, but the Rockies traded for. Man, don't get me started on minor league affiliate branding because I could talk about that forever. So I think that's maybe a good point to wrap it up so I can shut myself up. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Affected by Altitude. Patrick, thank you so much for joining me today. It's really great to have you. Where can the folks find you at, and what are you working on?
Yeah, Twitter at Patrick D. Lyons, Instagram, TikTok at Patrick D. Lyons, MLB, and yeah, writing for justbaseball.com and also on Who's Better Baseball podcast, where we have some good conversations. You know, Bobby Witt Jr. versus Gunnar Henderson. Who would you rather have? You know, we did a draft of first-time All-Stars. Like, hey, who's going to start? And I thought I did great. And then I totally skipped on Kyle Tucker. I'm like, he's going to be a lock for a first-time starting All-Star this year with the Astros. So we have some real fun debates and talking about who's going to be active at the trade deadline, who's going to move, doing that with my buddy Ryan Finkelstein over at Just Baseball. So Who's Better Baseball podcast. We have a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely check those out. As for me, you can find me over on purplerow.com writing the Monday Rock Pile and Weekly Pebble Report. You can also find me on Twitter at Evan_Lang27. I would love to hear from you. And you can find Rocky Mountain Rooftop on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Rocky Mountain Rooftop. That's at ROCKYMTN Rooftop. Patrick, thanks again for sticking with us here. Folks, we appreciate you listening. I know that this is coming out on a Tuesday instead of a Monday, but we still dig you tuning in all the same. We'll catch you next time. And how about Patrick? You hit him with it.
Farewell.
Hey, that was a good one.
Deborah.
Ma.